Chapter 9. Providence, Rhode Island, the only city I knew, was a large, old metropolis, set upon a graceful tree-crested hill with a multitude of fine wood, brick, and stone homes. Dignified office blocks and a busy port with many wharves were part of its commercial center. By way of contrast, San Francisco was set amidst steep, scrubby hills the color of dead straw, with dusty, sandy dunes and little shrubbery. Its former name was Yerba Buena, Spanish for good herb, but those minty-tasting bushes were for the most part gone, replaced by stunted shrubs and a muddle of low, wretched, lopsided buildings. These pathetic structures came right down to the water, as if they had slid off the hills into a great jumblement. I observed but one small wharf, plus a few others being constructed. What a dismal quilt without color vista! Though we approached a landing cove, perhaps a mile wide, our ship was required to anchor many yards from shore because the waters were so shallow. I could see, and worse, smell, broad flats of obnoxious mud. Even more remarkable within the cove, as though stuck in that mud, were great numbers of ships. They appeared altogether abandoned, a fleet of ghost-like vessels. But before I could make sense of what I was seeing, our noble captain, after 6 months of sailing, cried out, "Stand clear! Let go anchor!" What followed was something close to a riot, while almost 200 passengers, so long confined, in near pandemonium clamored to get off. It was as if people believed fist-sized gold nuggets lay upon the nearby beach, and all were determined, nay desperate, to claim their share. What's more, not only did the passengers rush to disembark, but the entire crew, captain included, also left. They too, some with their sea chests on their shoulders, were in quest of gold. One hears the expression, rats abandoning a sinking ship. Though we were not sinking, and did not see any rats leaving, we were none the less left behind. It seemed that no one wished to have anything more to do with the steadfast Stephanie K. The promised gold upon the land was the only desire. Yet none of the passengers could walk off. They had to be carried ashore by a flotilla of large rowboats called lighters. Multi-oared, these boats rushed out to meet us and poked about our hull like so many nursing piglets. Furthermore, the men who rowed these lighters implored our custom and asked, nay demanded, whether we had goods to sell. Then, to be carried to shore, these same rowers, better to call them thieves, insisted upon payment of $3 or $5. It was but our first experience of the extraordinary cost of living in San Francisco. Though father managed to disembark, he told Jacob and me to remain on board, while he went ashore to find and rent a fine house in which we might live. "Be patient," he said. "I want to make sure we have a graceful home." It did not take long before our ship was mostly emptied of people, no crew or officers remaining, and almost no passengers. The Stephanie K.'s sails hung limp, her deck littered with discarded things from boots to barrels. Jacob and I could have taken possession of the ship and sailed her to China if we'd had the skills. Having no such talent, there was little for us to do but to stare at this strange place called San Francisco. I was looking at a city, as I would later learn, made of prefabricated wood-frame houses with cloth or paper walls, lopsided packing boxes converted into homes, a few brick and adobe houses, plus flimsy wood houses from China. There were even peculiar iron houses from New York. Proper buildings were rare. No elegant squares. Nothing I observed of the city appeared attractive. San Francisco seemed to consist mostly of a multitude of sailcloth tents of different colors. Tents! Thousands of them! I was reminded of a large revival meeting camp. Yet I knew perfectly well it was gold the inhabitants were seeking here, not God. Truth to tell, I saw not one church spire. I would learn later that even our ship's chaplain and his wife had set off for the gold mines. No, I observed not a hint of the extraordinary fabled wealth. The worst of Providence seemed vastly more refined than the best of San Francisco. The word style could hardly be used here, surely not by me. The land of glittering gold revealed itself as mostly rich in rubbish. Let it be admitted, when one has been foolish enough to believe a myth, one casts more anger upon the myth than upon the fool who believed it. "Are we really going to live here?" Jacob asked me, his voice full of disbelief. For once my natural enthusiasm was so dimmed, I could only manage to say, "I fear so." It was 6 long hours before father returned. He came back as he had gone in one of those lighters. During that time the prospect that lay before us became worse. The empty vessels remained, but the tide had receded, so the mud flats had become further uncovered. These flats were full of small channels which looked like wet snakes, and the stink was extreme. "Come along," father called up to us. "I have arranged that our belongings will be brought later." Father shouted down with renewed excitement, "Have you found us a home?" "I have." "Is it bigger than we had on Sheldon Street? Shall I have a large bedroom of my own?" "You will see," said father, but I detected something in his voice that gave me unease. "What about food?" I asked. "Of course." We were rowed to shore. The boatman, an old grizzled fellow with long-fingered blue-veined hands and a battered top hat on his head, rowed his way through the twisty channels, maneuvering among those lifeless ships I had previously observed. These fully masted ships were huge, towering over our heads, pressed one upon another, as I might imagine a desperate naval battle, but without so much as one cannon boom. Instead, there was an altogether alarming lack of life. Puzzled, I stared up at the gigantic vessels, multi-masted fighting ships, barks, merchant ships, schooners, and brigs. There appeared to be hundreds of them, yet all appeared derelict. "Why are these ships here?" I asked the man who was rowing us. "Discarded," he said with a shrug. "The crews have gone off to the goldfields." "Just left the ships?" asked Jacob, eyes wide with wonder. "Nobody wants them," said our rower. "Help yourself if you'd like." He gave a gap-toothed grin and nodded at Jacob. "You can be captain." Sure enough, I observed signs nailed to the holds of a few ships that read "For sale" or "Free." As we wended our way, the forsaken ships bumped and banged one against another, creaking, rattling, and groaning. Some of them had begun to be stripped and torn apart. Others lay half sunk. It was all as extraordinary as it was grotesque, a fleet of ghostly hulks. But if they were apparitions, they were of a singular sort, for they threw off a strong stench, rather like bad cheese mixed with brackish sea-water. Jacob pinched his nose so hard its tip went white. I could only think, I want nothing to do with this. Our rower, who must have seen the look of amazement on our faces, grinned and said, "Folks are calling these ships Rotten Row."